this self-criticism that we see about the nation, why is it that in Western civilization we have so much trouble with nationhood?
You've spent 60 years teaching your children to hate your own civilization. Why are you surprised that they hate your civilization? Sorry, but that's what's happened.
It works.
It worked, and absolutely. And by the way, it's not just hate. It's hard to teach people to hate. What's much easier is to lie to them about history. So in the UK, for example, in England, there's this. The Church of England, I think, has just approved £1 billion worth of reparations because we talk endlessly about slavery, and the narrative on slavery in seems to me to be, there was no slavery, and then the British Empire came along and invented slavery, and then woke people came along and ended slavery. When, of course, we all know what actually happened, which is slaves were probably the first good that human beings ever traded. Never had anything to do with racism, by the way. It was a fact of life that conquered peoples would be subjugated by others and used as labor and would be traded. Native Americans kept slaves, and so did everybody else throughout history. The British Empire practiced slavery just like everybody else. Because of their superior technological advantage, they were able to move slaves across oceans in a way that others weren't. And then the British ended slavery, not only within the borders of their own realm, but also spent a tremendous amount of blood and treasure to force the trans-Saharan slave trade, which was much worse, lasted longer, had a higher death rate. The men were all castrated. The women were taken as sex slaves. They forced that slave trade to end at tremendous diplomatic, military, and monetary cost. And so, this idea that we must eternally apologize for the sins of the past seems to me absolutely ridiculous. Now, does that mean we shouldn't recognize that those things were bad? Yes, of course we should, and we should acknowledge and learn from them. But it seems to me very odd. I made this point in the book. I have a whole chapter on slavery in it, which is, imagine if you have to, that, 50 years from now, we're all going to be vegan because they get their way, right? Because eating animals is this terrible crime. Would we then say that the people who ended that practice were the most evil in history? That wouldn't make any sense at all. I think we would say, well, this is the first empire in the history of the world that ended this practice we now consider immoral. Good on them. And by the way, did so for moral reasons. I mean, the abolitionists in England were people who were motivated by a different morality that was developing, which said something about the value of the individual. So the idea that we would denigrate our history in this way, to me, seems absurd. And every civilization in history, every great empire in history is built on conquest. This is how the world is. This is human nature. And to pretend otherwise, I think, is very unwise.
And it seems that at the moment, Western civilization has never been safer, richer than ever. We should ultimately be ever more self-confident in ourselves, yet we are ever more self-critical about ourselves. Is it just because we've had it too good? Is that what allows us to have that luxury?
Well, it seems that way. Something I've been thinking about a lot is people are always very suspicious and wary of families that are able to preserve wealth over many generations. The Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the whoever's. And I think that's because it's very difficult. The first generation break through and build something special. The second manage it, and the third waste it, basically, is how it tends to go. So to be able to maintain generation upon generation of people who truly value what they have, even though they're growing up in increasing luxury, is very, very difficult. And this is where education comes in. And if we had people who were being educated about the history of their civilization and their society in an accurate way, I think we'd be in a far better place. But what has been happening on Western college campuses and in Western schools for the last many decades is the reason we are where we are.
One of the reasons why Western civilization has been successful is obviously its capacity to self-criticize, evolve, and improve. Everything you've been talking about tonight doesn't really sound like self-criticism anymore, right? It's something more malign. Does this mean that we can't grow from the experience, the challenges that Western civilization is currently facing?
Well, again, let's translate all of this conceptual stuff into simple language. If you talked about your spouse in the way that people talk about their country, people would call you an abuser. That's what they'd say. They'd say, "Why are you talking about your wife in this way? That's rude. That's wrong. That's immoral. That's." They would be suspicious of you. But the way that people talk about their own country is perfectly acceptable to do so. So self-criticism, as I mentioned about freedom of expression, is the bedrock of our progress. The ability to say, no, no, we shouldn't be continuing to do this. Actually, we should be, thinking about how to do this better. But it seems to me that we're in the grips of as Christianity has pulled back, we are now in the grips of a new religion that offers no absolution of any kind whatsoever. You cannot do anything to absolve yourself of your straight white male privilege. There's no way of you. You must just feel forever guilty. Um, and this isn't self-criticism. This is self-denigration, and it's designed for self-destruction. These people, as I say again, are the enemies.
So, to some sort of fracturing elements that we see in society. Now, Australia does pride itself as being arguably the most successful multicultural nation here on Earth. And we've sustained and have been great recipients of a high level of immigration for many years.